Walk through the grand halls of Vienna, glance at the imposing portraits of emperors and empresses, and you might think you know the story. You have heard whispers of inbred jaws of empires built on clever marriages, of tragic empresses and rigid rulers. These stories have settled in history books and popular culture painting, a vivid picture. But what if much of what you think you know about the Habsburgs is not quite true? What if the real lives behind the crowns were far more surprising, far more human, and infinitely more complex than the legends suggest? Prepare to pull back the velvet curtain on some of history's most persistent tales and discover the startling truth behind the most powerful dynasty Europe has ever seen. Number 10. The Spanish Habsburgs were just a sickly, dying line. You often hear that the Spanish branch of the Habsburg family was a collection of frail, weak rulers, doomed by their family's close intermarriages, barely clinging to power before their inevitable extinction. The image of King Charles II of Spain, often called the Bewitched, with his famous Habsburg jaw and numerous ailments, seems to confirm this tragic narrative. Many believe this line was nothing but a slow, painful decline leading to Spain's fall from its golden age. But the real story of the Spanish Habsburgs is far more vibrant, resilient, and ethereal than this simple, sad tale allows. Their reign, spanning from the early 16th century to the beginning of the 18th, saw Spain become a global superpower, an empire on which the sun truly never set. Philip II, Charles V's son, ruled an astonishing territory that included Spain, the Netherlands, vast swaths of Italy, and massive colonial holdings in the Americas. He was known as the Prudent King, not because he was weak, but because he was a meticulous, hard-working administrator who personally oversaw every detail of his sprawling empire, from his Spartan office in the Escorial. He was a man of immense power and political will, not a sickly figurehead. His reign was marked by military successes like the Battle of Lepanto, a decisive naval victory against the Ottoman Empire in 1571, and by ambitious projects like the Spanish Armada, which, while ultimately unsuccessful against England, showcased Spain's inimitable naval might. Philip II's empire was a powerhouse of global trade and military strength, a testament to a dynasty far from its last gasp. Even Charles II, often presented as the ultimate symbol of Habsburg decline, was not simply a passive victim of his health. While he undoubtedly suffered from significant physical and mental challenges, he was still the King of Spain, a powerful position that he held for 35 years. During his long reign, Spain actually experienced some economic recovery and intellectual flourishing. The court of Charles II was not a desolate wasteland. It was a vibrant center of art and culture. Diego Velázquez, one of the greatest painters in European history, served the Spanish Habsburg court, creating masterpieces that captured the very essence of the dynasty, including portraits of kings and queens that conveyed their dignity and power, not just their physical peculiarities. The Habsburgs were enthusiastic patrons of the arts, leading to a golden age of Spanish painting, literature, and architecture. Works like Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote and the plays of Pedro Calderón de la Barca emerged during this period, demonstrating a rich cultural landscape that defied notions of an entirely decrepit society. Furthermore, the Spanish Habsburgs were incredibly successful in their primary goal, maintaining and expanding their vast empire. They held on to the Netherlands for a remarkable period, despite constant rebellion and external pressures. They defended their Italian territories and solidified their control over the Americas, laying the foundations for Latin American nations. The wealth flowing from the Americas, though often mismanaged, fueled European economies and art for generations. The idea that this branch was merely a string of weak, dying men ignores their substantial contributions to European politics, culture, and global exploration. The dynasty produced formidable generals, shrewd diplomats, and dedicated administrators who shaped the course of world history. Their long rule saw not just challenges but immense achievements, a testament to their strength and endurance, not just their fragility. Number 9. The Habsburg Empire was a completely backward and stagnant entity. When people think of the Habsburg Empire, they sometimes imagine a dusty, old-fashioned monarchy, stuck in the past, resisting all modern advancements, while the rest of Europe surged ahead with industry and innovation. The image of Emperor Franz Joseph, with his sideburns and traditional uniforms, often reinforces this idea of a slow, unchanging realm. Many believe the empire was an economic and scientific backwater, just waiting to collapse under the weight of its own inertia. However, the Habsburg monarchy, especially in its later years, was far from stagnant. It embraced significant industrialization, scientific research, and cultural innovation, particularly in its capital city, Vienna, and other key urban centers like Prague, Budapest, and Trieste. The late 19th and early 20th centuries, often called the fin de siècle, were a period of astonishing creativity and progress across the empire. Vienna became a global hub of intellectual thought, art, and science. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, conducted his groundbreaking work in Vienna. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century, was also from Vienna. Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele. Revolutionary artists transformed the art world with their unique styles, challenging traditional aesthetics and ushering in modern art. Movements like Art Nouveau and Expressionism. The Vienna Secession, an art movement founded by Klimt, and others actively sought to break from the past and embrace new artistic ideas. Beyond the arts, the empire saw considerable industrial growth. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a leading producer of steel, iron, and machinery. Factories sprung up in Bohemia, Moravia, and Lower Austria, contributing significantly to the European economy. Railways crisscrossed the empire, connecting its diverse regions and facilitating trade and communication. The Semmering Railway, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, completed in 1854, was an engineering marvel for its time, demonstrating the empire's capacity for large-scale, modern infrastructure. Ports like Trieste on the Adriatic Sea became bustling international trade centers. Scientific and medical advancements were also a hallmark of the empire. The Vienna Medical School was renowned worldwide, attracting students and researchers from across the globe. Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician who worked in Vienna, made revolutionary discoveries about antiseptic procedures, dramatically reducing deaths from childbed fever. Other scientists made significant contributions in physics, chemistry, and engineering. The Technical University of Vienna and similar institutions in Prague and Budapest produced generations of innovators. Even in agriculture, often seen as a traditional sector, there were efforts at modernization. New farming techniques were introduced, and agricultural output increased, though not always uniformly, across the vast and varied territories. The empire's commitment to education was also substantial, with universities and schools promoting literacy and knowledge, laying the groundwork for further development. The narrative of a purely backward and unchanging empire misses the dynamic forces at play, the vibrant intellectual life, the thriving industries, and the significant contributions it made to the modern world. Before its dissolution, the Habsburg realm was a complex tapestry of tradition and modernity, constantly evolving, not a fossil stuck in time. Number 8. The Habsburgs were universally hated and constantly faced rebellion from their diverse peoples. Many people think of the Habsburg Empire as a tinderbox of ethnic tensions, a place where various nationalities were constantly at each other's throats, unified only by the iron fist of Vienna. The image of simmering resentment among Hungarians, Czechs, Poles, Croats, and others, all eager to break free, is a powerful one, suggesting that the empire's collapse in 1918 was an inevitable consequence of this deep-seated hatred. The reality was far more nuanced and complex. While nationalistic movements certainly grew stronger in the 19th century, and there were indeed moments of severe conflict, the empire was also a place where diverse peoples coexisted, collaborated, and sometimes even thrived under Habsburg rule. Loyalty to the emperor was not uncommon, even among non-Germanic populations. For many, the Habsburg monarchy represented a crucial unifying force, providing stability, a shared legal framework, and economic opportunities that transcended ethnic lines. The imperial and royal army was one of the most multi-ethnic fighting forces in history. Soldiers from every corner of the empire served side by side. Czechs, Poles, Croats, Slovaks, Romanians, Ukrainians, and Hungarians, all fighting under the black and yellow banner. Many of these soldiers, particularly officers, developed a strong sense of imperial identity. They saw themselves as loyal subjects of the emperor, and their shared service fostered a unique camaraderie that often superseded ethnic divisions. For some, the military provided a clear path for advancement and a sense of belonging that their local national movements could not always offer. The bureaucracy of the empire was another area where different nationalities worked together. Officials from various ethnic backgrounds served in administrative roles, ensuring the smooth functioning of the vast state. While German was often the language of administration, many officials were bilingual or multilingual, reflecting the diverse nature of the empire they served. These civil servants often felt a strong sense of duty to the common good of the monarchy. Furthermore, economic integration provided significant incentives for loyalty. The empire created a vast internal market, allowing for the free flow of goods and labor across its territories. This economic unity benefited many, providing access to wider markets for agricultural products and industrial goods. Farmers in Galicia found markets in Vienna, and factories in Bohemia sold their products across the entire realm. For many merchants and industrialists, the empire's economic unity was a valuable asset, not a burden. Even the fierce Hungarians struggled for autonomy in 1848. A major flashpoint led not to separation but to the Compromise of 1867, which created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This agreement gave Hungarians significant internal autonomy, establishing a system where two strong national entities coexisted under one sovereign. While not perfect, this compromise showed the Habsburgs' ability to adapt and negotiate with national movements, providing a framework for shared governance that lasted for half a century. Many Hungarians, despite their distinct identity, found a way to be loyal to both their nation and the shared imperial crown. There were certainly periods of unrest and nationalist aberrations, but to portray the entire empire as perpetually on the verge of ethnic rebellion ignores the vast periods of relative peace, cooperation, and even widespread loyalty that characterized much of its history. The empire was a complex mosaic, not a perpetually warring collection of peoples, and many of its inhabitants found a reason to endure and even prosper under the Habsburg eagle. Number 7. Rudolf was a pure rebel and revolutionary, fully against his father and the monarchy. When you hear about Crown Prince Rudolf, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, the story often paints him as a tragic, romantic figure, a radical liberal who constantly clashed with his conservative father. He is frequently portrayed as a frustrated revolutionary eager to dismantle the old order and usher in a modern democratic era, only to be stifled by the rigid imperial court, and ultimately driven to despair and suicide at Mayerling. The truth about Crown Prince Rudolf is far more complex than this simple rebel narrative. While it is true that he held more liberal views than his father and often felt stifled by the conservative court environment, he was not a straightforward revolutionary seeking to overthrow the monarchy. Rudolf was deeply interested in science, journalism, and modern ideas, but his vision for the empire was one of reform, not revolution. He wanted to modernize the Habsburg state, to make it more efficient, more just, and more capable of adapting to the challenges of the late 19th century. He believed in the strength and future of the Habsburg dynasty, but he felt it needed to evolve, to survive. Rudolf was an accomplished ornithologist, spending much of his time studying birds and their habitats. He contributed to scientific journals and even co-authored a massive encyclopedia of Austria-Hungary, demonstrating a deep intellectual curiosity and a commitment to understanding the diverse lands and peoples of the empire. This was not the work of a man solely consumed by political rebellion. He saw knowledge and scientific progress as vital for the empire's future. His political disagreements with his father were real, but they often stemmed from different approaches to the same goal, preserving the monarchy. Rudolf favored a stronger alliance with the German Empire, but he also had deep sympathies for the Slavic populations within Austria, Hungary, and believed in strengthening their positions within the empire to counter Hungarian dominance. These were complex political calculations, not simply an anarchist's desire to burn down the system. He engaged in secret journalistic activities, writing articles that criticized the government and advocated for reform, but he always did so anonymously, understanding the delicate balance of his position as heir to the throne. He was trying to influence policy and public opinion, not incite an uprising. Rudolf's personal life was indeed troubled, marked by an unhappy marriage, extramarital affairs, and a growing sense of despair. His death at Merling in 1889, alongside his mistress, Mary Vetsera, was a profound tragedy, shrouded in mystery and speculation. While the exact motives remain debated, it is clear that his psychological state, compounded by a life under immense pressure and a sense of isolation, played a significant role. It was a personal tragedy intertwined with the political anxieties of the era, not solely the act of a frustrated revolutionary. He was a deeply intelligent, sensitive, and troubled man who grappled with the burden of his heritage and the demands of a changing world, seeking to reform the empire rather than destroy it. His story is one of internal conflict and societal pressure, not simple rebellion. Number 6. Maximilian of Mexico was a naive fool who was easily manipulated by Napoleon III. Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico, the younger brother of Franz Joseph, is often depicted as a romantic but ultimately tragic figure, a dreamer easily led astray by the machinations of Napoleon. The common narrative paints him as a clueless, naive European prince who was tricked into taking a throne in a faraway land, completely unprepared for the political realities of Mexico, and thus destined for a quick, bloody end. This story suggests he was a mere puppet, a plaything of European imperial ambitions. This portrayal of Maximilian misses the mark significantly. Maximilian was not a naive fool. He was an intelligent, ambitious, and well-traveled man, with extensive naval experience and a genuine interest in governance. Before accepting the Mexican crown, he served as the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Austrian Navy, a position he excelled at modernizing the fleet and initiating scientific expeditions. He was a keen botanist, an explorer, demonstrating a sharp mind and an adventurous spirit. He also served as governor of the Kingdom of Lombardy, Venetia, a Habsburg territory in Italy, where he implemented reforms and gained valuable administrative experience. He was a capable administrator and a serious, if somewhat idealistic, statesman. When Napoleon III offered him the Mexican throne in the early 1860s, Maximilian did not jump at the chance. Without careful consideration, he consulted extensively with advisors, read countless reports on Mexico, and even initially refused the offer multiple times, understanding the immense risks involved. He only accepted after receiving assurances of widespread Mexican support and a clear mandate from a plebiscite. Even if that vote was heavily influenced by French occupation, he truly believed he was accepting a legitimate call to bring stability and progress to Mexico. Once in Mexico, Maximilian proved to be far from a passive figurehead. He quickly embraced Mexican culture, learned Spanish, and showed a genuine desire to improve the lives of his new subjects. He was surprisingly progressive for a European monarch of his time. He maintained many of the liberal reforms enacted by the previous Republican government, including land reform and the abolition of peonage, a form of forced labor. He also promoted religious tolerance, limited the power of the church, and established new schools. He made efforts to integrate indigenous populations into national life, listening to their concerns and attempting to protect their rights. His court attracted intellectuals and artists, and he genuinely sought to build a modern, prosperous Mexico. His downfall was not due to his naivety or lack of effort, but to complex Gultial forces beyond his control. The American Civil War ended, allowing the United States to actively support Benito Juárez and the Republican cause in Mexico, viewing French intervention as a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Napoleon III, facing mounting financial pressures and the threat of war in Europe, gradually withdrew his French troops, leaving Maximilian without his primary military support. Maximilian bravely chose to stay in Mexico and fight for his adopted country even when a clear path to escape was available. His execution in 1867, alongside two of his loyal Mexican generals, was a tragic end to an ambitious and dedicated, though ultimately doomed, project. He was not a simple puppet, but a man of conviction who miscalculated the forces aligned against him. Number 5. Cisse was purely a tragic, romantic figure, entirely detached from court life. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known to the world as Sisi, is almost universally remembered as a beautiful, melancholic empress, a free spirit trapped in the stifling golden cage of the Habsburg court. The popular image shows her as a tortured soul, obsessed with her beauty, constantly fleeing her royal duties, and ultimately dying a tragic, isolated death. This narrative suggests she was an ethereal, poetic figure, utterly detached from the practicalities of governance or the people of the empire. While Sisi undoubtedly struggled with the rigid etiquette of the Viennese court and chafed under the constraints of her position, portraying her as solely a tragic, detached romantic is a significant oversimplification. Sisi was a complex woman with many facets, far more engaged and influential in certain areas than usually acknowledged, and possessing a steely resolve beneath her delicate exterior. She was indeed obsessed with maintaining her legendary beauty, spending hours on her hair, and riding horses to keep her figure. But this was not mere vanity. It was a form of control in a life where she had very little. Her rigorous exercise routines, including long walks, horseback riding, and even gymnastics, were radical for a 19th century empress and demonstrated a fierce discipline. She was an accomplished horsewoman, riding daringly and participating in hunting meets across Europe, where she earned a reputation for her skill and bravery. This active pursuit of physical perfection was a testament to her strong will and refusal to conform entirely to courtly idleness. Furthermore, Sisi was not entirely detached from politics, despite her dislike for formal court duties. She played a surprisingly crucial role in the Compromise of 1867, which created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. Empress Elizabeth had a deep affection for Hungary and its people. She learned the Hungarian language, which was unusual for a Habsburg empress, and surrounded herself with Hungarian ladies-in-waiting and advisors. She developed a strong personal friendship with Count Gyula Undasi, a leading Hungarian statesman. Sisi actively used her influence with her husband, Emperor Franz Joseph, to advocate for the Hungarian cause. Her personal connections and tireless efforts helped bridge the gap between the emperor and the Hungarian magnates, paving the way for the historic agreement that reshaped the empire and ensured its survival for another half-century. Her role was not public, but her private advocacy was instrumental. Sisi was also an intellectual, with a deep love for poetry and classical literature. She wrote her own poems, some of which expressed her inner turmoil and longing for freedom, but others to quite a sharp wit and keen observation. She cultivated friendships with scholars and writers, and her private library was extensive. This intellectual depth contradicts the image of a purely superficial beauty. Her travels, often seen as mere escapes, were also a way for her to explore the world, meet different people, and satisfy her insatiable curiosity. While she found the official duties of an empress taxing, she engaged with the world on her own terms, seeking knowledge and experience beyond the confines of the Hofburg. Sisi was not just a beautiful, sad empress. She was a multifaceted woman who found ways to exert influence, pursue her passions, and live a life of surprising agency, despite the immense pressures of her royal position. Number 4. Franz Joseph was a rigid, old-fashioned emperor who resisted all change. When people think of Emperor Franz Joseph, who ruled the Habsburg monarchy for an incredible 68 years, the image that often comes to mind is of an unchanging, stern old man, stuck in the past, stubbornly resisting every attempt at modernization. He is frequently seen as a symbol of the empire's anachronistic nature, a ruler who simply presided over a gradual decline because he refused to adapt. The narrative suggests he was solely focused on tradition and order, with no interest in progress. However, a closer look at Franz Joseph's long reign reveals a much more nuanced picture. While he was indeed a deeply traditional man committed to duty and the imperial institution, he was also a pragmatic ruler who understood the need for change and implemented significant reforms. He wasn't a revolutionary, but he was far from a blind reactionary. He presided over a period of remarkable transformation within the empire, often adapting to the political and social currents swirling around him. Franz Joseph oversaw the industrialization. During his reign, railway networks expanded dramatically, connecting distant parts of the monarchy and facilitating trade and communication. Factories sprang up, new technologies were adopted, and urban centers like Vienna, Prague, and Budapest grew exponentially, becoming major European metropolises. He understood that economic modernization was essential for the empire's strength and competitiveness in a rapidly changing world. Vienna, under his watchful eye, was transformed into a modern capital, with the construction of the Ringstrasse Grand Boulevard lined with magnificent public buildings like the Parliament, the City Hall, and the University, symbolizing the empire's commitment to progress and culture. Politically, Franz Joseph showed a surprising capacity for adaptation, even if reluctantly at times. After the revolutionary upheaval of 1848, he experimented with various forms of constitutional governance. Although he was initially an absolutist, he eventually recognized the need for a more representative system. His most significant political concession was the Compromise of 1867, which transformed the Austrian Empire into the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This radical restructuring granted Hungary significant autonomy, a move that required immense political flexibility and foresight. While often seen as a necessary evil, it was a profound shift in governance that ensured the empire's stability for another 5 decades, a testament to his ability to compromise when faced with pressing challenges. Franz Joseph was also a remarkably diligent and hard-working monarch. He rose early every day, working through stacks of documents, signing decrees and meeting with ministers. His commitment to his duties was absolute, and he meticulously oversaw the administration of his vast empire. This dedication, far from being a sign of stagnation, allowed him to remain deeply informed about the challenges and opportunities facing his realm, even as his personal preferences leaned towards tradition. He lived through profound changes, from the unification of Italy and Germany to the rise of mass politics and the advent of the automobile. He navigated a complex galling landscape, making alliances and attempting to maintain peace in a volatile Europe. His long reign was a testament not to his rigidity but to his endurance and his pragmatic, if sometimes slow, embrace of necessary evolution. He guided the empire through an era of immense change, making decisions that, for better or worse, shaped its destiny. Number 3. Maria Theresa was a weak female ruler who struggled to maintain power. When you hear about Maria Theresa, the great Habsburg empress, the story often begins with her vulnerability. You might hear about her being a young, inexperienced woman surrounded by powerful male advisors and envious European monarchs, all ready to snatch away her inheritance. The narrative frequently emphasizes her initial weakness and the immense struggle she faced in the War of the Austrian Succession, implying that she was somehow an anomaly, struggling against the odds simply because she was female, constantly on the defensive. The truth is that Maria Theresa was one of the most formidable and successful rulers in European history, male or female. She was anything but weak. From the moment she ascended the throne in 1740, she demonstrated an iron will, incredible political acumen, and an unwavering commitment to her dynasty and her people. She inherited a chaotic empire with a depleted treasury and an ill-equipped army, but she transformed it into a modern, powerful state. The War of the Austrian Succession, which erupted almost immediately upon her ascension, saw multiple European powers, including Prussia, France, and Bavaria, challenging her right to rule. While she lost the province of Silesia to Frederick the Great of Prussia, she fought back fiercely and ultimately managed to secure the rest of her vast inheritance. Her famous appeal to the Hungarian nobles in 1741, where she presented her infant son, Joseph, is often depicted as an emotional plea from a helpless woman. In reality, it was a shrewd political move, appealing to their honor and loyalty, which secured their crucial military support. She was playing a dangerous game, but she did so with remarkable courage and intelligence. Maria Theresa was an administrative genius. She understood that military might had to be supported by a strong centralized state. She launched a series of sweeping reforms that modernized every aspect of her empire. She reformed the military, increasing its size, improving training, and establishing military academies, including the famous Theresian Military Academy. She reorganized the financial system, creating a more efficient tax collection system and bringing the national debt under control. She also reformed the education system, establishing new schools, including institutions for the education of girls, and even laying the groundwork for the University of Innsbruck and the medical faculty in Vienna. Her reforms aimed to centralize power, increase efficiency, and strengthen the state, all signs of a powerful and forward-thinking ruler, not a weak one. Her reign was marked by an extraordinary output of work. She would rise early, attend Mass, and then work for hours, reviewing documents, making decisions, and meeting with ministers. She meticulously oversaw every detail of her government. Despite having 16 children, she never allowed her family life to overshadow her duties as empress. She was a dedicated mother, but she was first and foremost a powerful monarch who wielded absolute authority with unwavering resolve. She chose her ministers wisely, listened to their advice, but ultimately made the final decisions herself. The period of her rule is often called the Theresian era in Austrian history, a testament to her profound and lasting impact on the empire. She was not a struggling woman. She was a dominant force who reshaped the Habsburg monarchy and left an enduring legacy of strength and progress. Number 2. The Habsburgs always married their way to power and never fought wars. The old saying, "Let others wage war, but you, happy Austria, marry," is so catchy that it has become almost synonymous with the Habsburg dynasty. This widely believed myth suggests that the Habsburgs were essentially pacifists, expanding their empire not through military conquest or strategic battles, but solely through clever dynastic marriages. The image is of a family avoiding the battlefield, preferring instead to arrange advantageous weddings to gain territory and influence. This popular saying, while containing a grain of truth about the importance of marriage in Habsburg strategy, grossly misrepresents their history. The Habsburgs were formidable warriors, skilled military strategists, and actively engaged in wars throughout their centuries-long history, often leading their armies personally. To ignore their military prowess is to miss a huge part of their rise and survival. Consider Charles V, perhaps the most powerful Habsburg ruler. He inherited a vast empire that stretched across Europe and the Americas, certainly thanks in part to strategic marriages, but He spent much of his reign actively leading armies and fighting wars. He fought against the Ottoman Empire, against the French for control of Italy, against the German Protestant princes, and even battled pirates in the Mediterranean. He led troops on campaign, oversaw sieges, and engaged in complex military maneuvers. The Battle of Pavia in 1525, where his forces decisively defeated the French and captured King Francis I, was a major military victory that cemented Habsburg dominance. In Italy, Charles V was a warrior emperor, not just a marital strategist. Fast forward to the 17th and 18th centuries, and you find figures like Prince Eugene of Savoy, one of the greatest military commanders in European history, who served the Habsburg emperors Leopold I, Joseph I, and Charles VI. Eugene of Savoy's victories against the Ottoman Empire at Zenta in 16 and Petrovaradin in 1716, and his crucial role in the War of the Spanish Succession, where he fought alongside, utterly transformed the map of Europe and secured the Habsburgs' place as a major European power. These were not battles won by marriage. They were won by brilliant military leadership and disciplined armies. Maria Theresa, as mentioned earlier, fought the War of the Austrian Succession to secure her inheritance, and then spent the rest of her reign strengthening her military. Her son, Emperor Joseph II, although known as an enlightened reformer, also engaged in military campaigns. Even in the 19th century, when the empire faced growing challenges, figures like Archduke Charles, one of Napoleon's most formidable opponents, commanded Habsburg armies with skill and often achieved significant results, such as the Battle of Aspern-Essling, where he inflicted Napoleon's first major defeat. While dynastic marriages were undoubtedly a cornerstone of Habsburg strategy, allowing them to gain new lands like Burgundy, Bohemia, and Hungary through inheritance, this was always complemented by significant military power. Marriages often provided a legal claim, but military force was frequently needed to defend or enforce those claims. The Habsburgs maintained one of Europe's largest and most enduring armies, for centuries engaged in countless wars, and produced many skilled generals. The idea that they were only successful through weddings is a charming but ultimately misleading simplification of a long and often bloody history of conquest and defense. Number 1. Inbreeding caused their downfall and all their problems. When you hear about the Habsburgs, especially the Spanish branch, the word inbreeding often comes up immediately. The image of the famous Habsburg jaw, the numerous ailments of King Charles II of Spain, and the eventual extinction of the Spanish line are frequently presented as direct proof that constant intermarriage within the family led to their inevitable decline, physical deformities, mental incapacities, and ultimately the dynasty's collapse. This idea is powerful and often presented as the primary reason for any Habsburg misfortune or their eventual end. While it is true that the Habsburgs practiced a high degree of endogamy, marrying within their own family, particularly cousins and even nieces, and that this practice led to a higher incidence of certain genetic conditions, to claim it caused all their problems or their downfall is a massive oversimplification and largely a myth. The Habsburg dynasty endured for centuries, demonstrating remarkable resilience and producing many highly capable, intelligent, and physically robust rulers, despite their shared genetic heritage. Consider Emperor Charles V, who ruled an empire stretching across continents. He was a robust, energetic ruler who personally led armies, traveled extensively, and managed a vast administration. His physical stamina was legendary, and he certainly bore the characteristic Habsburg jaw, yet it did not impede his immense capabilities. His grandson, Philip II of Spain, also exhibited the jaw, but was known for his relentless work, ruling a global empire. Empress Maria Theresa, a pivotal figure in Austrian history, was a formidable and brilliant ruler. She was highly intelligent, politically shrewd, and incredibly energetic, managing both a vast empire and 16 children. She too was a product of generations of Habsburg intermarriage, yet she stands as one of Europe's most successful monarchs. Her son, Joseph II, was a tireless reformer, almost hyperactive in his pursuit of modernization. Franz Joseph, who reigned for almost 70 years, was known for his incredible work, ethic, and physical endurance, continuing his duties even into old age. These individuals utterly defy the notion that inbreeding uniformly produced weak or incompetent rulers. The Habsburg jaw or mandibular prognathism, while genetically linked, was largely a cosmetic trait, and while some individuals suffered from a range of health issues, it is incorrect to attribute all their misfortunes or the collapse of the empire. The collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918 was due to complex Gultail forces, the First World War, the rise of nationalism, internal political pressures, and economic strains. Not a sudden genetic frailty that debilitated the ruling family. The Spanish Habsburg line did die out with Charles II, and his health was undoubtedly poor, but this was the end of one branch, not the entire dynasty. The Austrian branch continued for another 2 centuries, producing numerous heirs and reigning effectively. Disease, accidents, and political assassinations also played significant roles in the lives and deaths of many Habsburgs, just as they did for other royal families. The Black Death, smallpox, tuberculosis, and other infectious diseases often had far more devastating impacts on populations and royal lines than inherited conditions. Furthermore, the political challenges faced by the Habsburgs, wars, revolutions, the rise of rival powers, the complexities of governing a multi-ethnic empire were external factors that would have challenged any dynasty. Regardless genetic makeup, to blame inbreeding for all their woes reduces a rich and complex history to a simple biological determinism, ignoring the centuries of political, military, and cultural achievements of one of Europe's most enduring and affluent families.